Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. Getting fired is supposed to feel devastating. For Angela Heath, it felt like freedom drinks, dancing, and a deep exhale of relief. That liberation sparked a journey from accidental expertise to intentional empire building. A publisher discovered her writing, leading to a multi book platform. Then, her son's cancer diagnosis forced her to rebuild everything: her business and her relationship with work. Today, she helps solopreneurs write books and scale smart in an AI powered world with one rule: your heart has to sing and your cash register has to go ka-ching. No exceptions. If you're building expertise in a world that won't stop shifting, this conversation is your roadmap. I'll see you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest is a reinvention queen who's turned career curveballs into a business empire, helping solopreneurs write books, build authority, and scale smart in an AI-powered world. Angela, welcome to the show.
Hi, Nikhil. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm going to dive right in. So, your first leap into solopreneurship came after facing some career setbacks. You were passed over for a promotion, and then you mentioned getting fired. What did that chapter teach you about betting on yourself?
Oh, that was such a wonderful time, actually. People think that I would be so upset because I got fired, but I was not. I was so relieved because I felt like I was in prison with that company. I
Wow.
was very relieved. I went out with a friend, we had some drinks, we danced, and I truly celebrated being free.
Wow. I mean, now I believe they have like breakup parties. It sounds almost like you sort of celebrated the end of a chapter, right? I have to say it's the first time I've heard someone say that, but I love it. Um, and so, did you already know you wanted to do something on your own? Did you just needed the impetus? Or talk to me a little bit more about that
Yeah, I already
reaction.
knew. I
Yeah.
already knew. I had only been at that job for 6 months. I went there because it was what we call it in the DC area, Beltway Bandits. That
Right.
means you're a consulting company and most of your revenue is coming from the federal government. So I didn't know what consulting was really about. I went to the Beltway Bandit to learn consulting. So I had never intended to be there, but maybe about 2 years. And instead, they let me go in 6 months. But like I said, it was such a joyous occasion. I was so happy.
It sounds like it, and you still light up when you talk about it. So I totally believe it. Now, now the interesting thing that happened next was you also mentioned your first book sort of catapulted you into becoming a national expert almost overnight, right? So
Yeah.
how did that unexpected visibility sort of transform your business trajectory?
Yeah, it was really like totally unplanned. I wish I could pretend like it was my strategy, but no, it was so unplanned. A publisher saw something I had written for my employer at the time and approached me and said, "Hey, can you write a book for us?" And I said, "Yes." I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know how to write a book." And I recruited a co author. We did that first book. And then a second publisher saw the first book and said, "Hey, can you write for a consumer audience?" And we got a two, I got a 2 book deal with the second publisher. So after I did 3 books, it was probably like 5, 6 years. I need to figure out exactly how long it took, but it was pretty quick. And I was just an instant expert. I didn't plan it, but it worked out well for me.
Yeah, and that's amazing. As you said, anybody would wish that. And it's interesting you said that that wasn't your strategy, because I think very few people would actually admit that, most people would say that was the strategy. That was always part of the plan. But, I think it's interesting that it's almost like you have to put yourself out there for things to happen, right? So it's the first
Yeah.
piece of writing that got the attention, and then the second book publisher. And I think that's the sort of lesson that I always tell solopreneurs is like, you have to keep doing stuff, right?
Right.
For that lightning to strike, which it will only happen because some people just sit around, I think, and wait for it to happen. And that doesn't work.
No, that does not work. And it's a risk. I mean, you know that. Whenever we put something out, I mean, that was like really hard because when you write a book, it's like you're giving birth to a child and you don't want anybody to look in the crib and say, "My, that's an ugly child," right? So you feel so like vulnerable.
Yeah.
But and you will have critics, you always will, no matter what you do, but that's okay. You put your best foot forward. You be very diligent to make it as best as possible, but you have to know that there's always going to be a look back. I could have did this different. I could have done more. But we do what we can do at the time we do it. That's the best we can do.
Yeah, and you have to drown out the naysayers, right? I think you raised a very interesting point because one of the things about this journey, which I've had to grapple with, is it's literally you're putting you out there, right? You are the brand, you are everything. There's nothing to sort of shield you. Like when you're working for a corporation, you're
Right.
sort of shepherding their brand, you're selling their brand. If someone rejects IBM, I'm like, okay, it was IBM, not me. But when you're on your own, like you said, everything is your baby, right? Everything you produce is you're putting a piece of yourself out into the world. So I think that's that's very insightful. Now, the other thing you also mentioned to me was um, that during your son's cancer treatment, you had to step away completely from your business, right? So
Yes.
how did that profound personal crisis sort of change your relationship with work and success and how you think about those things?
Oh, it was a total change. Now, that was a total change. Getting
Yeah.
fired was nothing.
Right.
But that was a total change because I didn't know when he was first diagnosed. I had no idea it would take 3.5 years, that I
Right.
would be pretty much unemployed. I think 1 year, the most money I made during that time, I made $14,000 1 year. But I didn't know that that would happen. And professionally, I was working on another book because I was in the hospital all the time. But I couldn't concentrate on the book. But I always had it at the hospital. What are you doing? I'm working on a book. I'm working on a book. But I think what it did is, prior to that, when I had my first company, the consulting group, I was a workaholic. I
Right.
was a workaholic, but I loved my work. But once my son had his medical crisis, I decided I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to be flying all around, to speak and train and consult. I don't want to do that. It's too much. And I decided to reform. So I still work hard, but I don't consider myself to be a workaholic. And I don't travel like I used to. I used to travel way too much. But it did change my perspective on business.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it's a frightening awakening, a wake up call, right? In that way. But I think that's something a lot of solopreneurs struggle with because you don't really have boundaries. I mean, I know so many people who are surprised when I tell them I'm working harder and more than I ever did in a corporate job. I used to complain about my work hours there, right? So I think it's very important to your point to sort of have boundaries and sort of find the balance. Now, obviously, you do need to work hard, and you're one person, but
Yeah,
you
and
also
when my son was
yeah,
young, I love to tell this story. When he
yeah,
was young, I mean, very young, like 3, 4, 5, I would put a pallet at my client's office for him to lie down on when it was proposal writing season. Because,
wow,
when you're writing proposals, you're up half the night. So go pick him up from daycare, get the snacks, get the blanket. He'd be laying down. And when he was about 6 or 7, somebody said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" He said, "I don't want to be a consultant. I don't want to be a consultant."
yeah. Well, he learned that lesson early, right?
So
So
that's how hard I used to work. My son was like, "I'll never do that."
yeah, that's a different definition of a workaholic.
Right, right.
So now the other thing that you mentioned to me is when you returned to your work after he got better, you just felt like you didn't have love for your old business anymore, right? So how
Right.
did you rediscover your professional passion again?
It took a little while. I started doing what I think many people do when they want to start a business, become self employed. They start listening to, oh, what's the hottest thing? What is making the most money? Oh, what are my friends doing? They say it's rewarding. So I went out there and I tried to copy everybody who was copyable, is that a word? I tried to copy other people, and it was a hot mess. I didn't make any money. I felt like I was just running around in circles. I wasn't committed to anything because I was trying to do something that was not truly me. And eventually, I had to sit down with myself when I became broke and say, what is it when you had that consulting group? What was it that your customers liked about you? And it was speaking, training, and creating model programs. So I went, did the research, and I said, what can I do that will pull all of that together, but I don't need to travel? And so I started working online and I wrote my fourth book, and that started this company.
Wow. And what surprised you most about sort of building that business again from scratch? I mean, you talked about sort of like the trials and errors, but
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of trials and errors, I think the thing that surprised me is how much business changes over 20 years.
right.
When I started my first business, most of what we do today, you didn't have to do. So it was a whole new experience of, all of the technology you had to bring to bear into your business. That was like, oh my gosh, it took me totally out of my comfort zone, and I'm still outside of my comfort zone. So I think that was like the challenge. But on the positive side, the ability to reach people all over the world is just astonishing. When you can do a webinar and you have people from England and Africa and Belgium, chiming into some of our digital events, I'm just blown away with that. I never thought I'd be able to talk to people in so many different countries.
Yeah, true. I mean, we wouldn't have met if this whole platform hadn't opened up, right? And I mean, even
Right.
this podcast, sharing this, I have listeners in 10 countries now, I found out, which is awesome. So, but what you said earlier, I think really resonate with me too, is like, I think this is another trap a lot of solopreneurs fall into is like
Mhm.
chasing what they think is successful, right? For somebody else. It's almost like there's a model they think or a framework they can follow and success will follow, but it doesn't work that way, right? And I think the two things you said are very important, which is you have to be you and figure out what value you can bring, what expertise you can bring, obviously, to an audience. And I love that you said you have to also be adaptable to the
Yeah.
change that's happening around you, right?
Yeah, Nikhil, one of the things that I've found, and it still is happening today with a lot of business builders, is we believe the marketing copy.
Yeah.
So when someone says, oh, if you implement my strategy, you can become a millionaire in just 6 weeks. And so everybody runs over because everybody wants to get to seven figures and over. Everybody runs over to implement whatever the last person did that seemed to be successful. And of course, we all have to do some of that. We have to do some of that. But I think the real challenge is to be authentic and the very core of what your business is. And I think that temptation to run after the latest, hottest strategy has to be balanced. Some things we do need to pursue, but probably most of these things we need to just, keep our focus on where we're going and let it pass us by.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the time, you just have to have your blinders on. And honestly, social media does not make that easier today in the age we live in, right? Because people are constantly talking about what you just described, which is, seven figures in 7 days. Yeah, it
Right.
doesn't quite happen that way. So, The other thing I want to touch on in terms of brand building is also your brand now spans sort of multiple domains, if you like, right? Consulting, training, publishing, digital services. So, can you talk a little bit about what's your secret to helping people understand your value proposition, despite the fact that you have multiple offerings?
People don't really realize how I put everything together. It makes total logic to me. So, my heart is to help people who are self employed. So, the
Right.
solopreneur, the small business owner, because I know that we are the backbone of the American economy. I know that we are overlooked, we have fewer resources than larger companies. And there are things that we can do as small companies that many times the founder, the owner doesn't realize that it's available to us, especially now with AI. So everything I do is really geared toward helping that expert, that founder, become better known in their niche or their industry. Now, you don't have to be on every platform. You don't have to be, on the Oprah show. That would be great. But you don't have to get there. You just have to move up higher and higher and higher in your area of expertise in terms of your thought leadership. So, how do you do that? You do it with a book. If you can create a book, it doesn't have to be the best book in the world. Guess what? Out of the 6 books that I wrote, only one of them was a bestseller. Only one. But well, they didn't all, because a couple of them didn't really make much money, but 4 out of 6 made 6 figures,
Yeah.
caused 6 figures to come into the business. So you don't even have to have that, but a book is helpful. Speaking is helpful, whether you do a podcast or you stand on stages or you do master classes, whatever. Speaking allows people to see you. And if they see you, they might like you. So speaking is something that I feel like if you want to build brand authority, you need to do. And then, of course, your signature program. How do you deliver? What makes you different? And we can bring AI in to support all of that. So, those are the areas that I work, but it's all around helping the solopreneurs, so self employed people, some even freelancers, figure out how do we compete better, larger than what we used to be able to do some years ago.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that's very clear. So helping them amplify their expertise or their value, right? And you bring a toolkit, I think is the way I think about it now. You bring basically a box of, tools that you can help them deploy. Like you said, everyone doesn't have to write a book, but they could do a webinar, or they could do, a training, or they could speak on stages. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, the thing I wanted to also ask you was sort of, you've built your own authority, right? So you mentioned you're sort of helping others build their expertise and their authority. So, but in your journey, can you talk about what were the breakthrough moments in establishing your authority, and then sort of how that experience informs how you guide clients? Because yours was a little bit overnight, right? Which you said doesn't
Well,
happen for.
at the beginning, when I did
Yeah,
my first company, yeah, you know, I can't tell you how it happened. I
right.
can't
Yeah,
really
there's
tell
no
you,
formula, like you said. Yeah,
but it was the books. It
yeah,
was definitely the books, because if you have, I call it now, I've researched it, I found that most experts in almost any genre, if they have a 3 book stack, you've got 3 books around the same topic. You can look at it 3 different ways, from different vantage points, or you could, the latest, hottest topics within your particular niche. I mean, that proves that you're an expert, because who is going to do 3 books? Well, these days they might do it with AI, but 3 good books,
right.
3 good books.
Not written by AI. Yeah,
You can write a book with AI too. We use some AI tools, but you have to make it authentic. You need to create your AI ghostwriter and all of that good stuff. So I think the books really do establish a level of expertise if you've got something to say in the book, because a lot of people throw up books, they're not good.
yeah.
You've got to have something to say. You need to have a roadmap. because people are going to buy the book because you're able to create a transformation. You're going to take them on the journey that they want to go on and to arrive at the destination that you promise. So you need to have some type of roadmap. But I think when I started the second business, I had studied how books really sort of transform people's companies and their lives. But I was really surprised that when I started doing like the online master classes, there are people who show up at these master classes and they don't even have to be huge. We think, oh, so and so had 10,000 people on his class. Your class doesn't have to be huge. I did a class one time, and I think there might have been 20 or 30 people in the class. It was a free master class. There was one person, I didn't even know who they were, but they came in to check me out. And they wanted me to host a webinar for their company. So that particular customer I had for 5 years. And one webinar turned to two. I represented them on, business forums, and I ended up creating a whole design for them for some of the work that they were doing and consulting and training. You don't know who is in that virtual audience. So that was surprising because, I thought, oh, it's only 20 people on here. I didn't know that that would happen.
Yeah, no, and I love what the story you just shared, because, like you said, it's like you're helping people put themselves out there, right? Because it's like people are looking for your expertise, but if they don't know where to find you, they're not going to find you, right? So the
Right,
more opportunities you create to sort of show the world what you're capable of, and like you said, it has to be real. It can't just be fluff, because
right.
obviously then no one's going to care. But no, I absolutely love that. Um, so is there a part of your brand you're still figuring out? You sort of have, I think you have it down in terms of your value proposition and what you're, but is there any piece that you're still trying to sort of massage? And yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still massaging a few things. Like I do a lot of testing
Mhm.
of training materials. I do a lot of testing of lead magnets. So I haven't gotten it like totally dialed in yet, but I'm, testing and iterating. And I'm hoping that by the end of the year, I will have just a set of evergreen tools that are going to be pretty good. There probably will be some um, assistance along with them, but they'll probably be pretty good for a little while, at least, hopefully. You never know, though, because technology is changing so fast. We never know what we have to tweak like next week. But yeah, I'm still working on it.
Yeah, and you're right though. I mean, the one thing that I always say though is with, especially with brand building, is technology changes, but human nature doesn't, right? So if what you're saying resonates, the medium may change, but the message doesn't have to, right? So I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
what you mean by evergreen, right? Because I think there is stuff that, if I go back and look at history, it's like I feel like we're just repeating some of the same stuff
right,
that we
right.
did before, right?
But you put a different label on it.
Yeah,
Put it this it's just the frame. It's the
yeah,
frame. And some things are I love when people come up with their own frames for something that's been done numerous, numerous times before, because that's what makes it feel fresh.
true.
That's what makes it feel fresh and interesting.
Yeah, and that comes from lived experience, right? Because I mean, you're walking the talk that you've actually been through now. After your first book, you've started another company and you sort of built that through in a slightly different path. So I think that authenticity has to be there too, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how we help people with things we don't know how to do. we we better get some partners that know how to do it. And that's legit. But I have met people who actually sell things that they don't know how to produce. And that's really sad because eventually that will catch up with them and the word will be out. And then that business will probably go under. So we want to be true to our core.
I agree, and I agree. There are a lot of shortcuts, but you always end up in a bad place when you try and take them. So I think that's good advice. So the other thing which is really interesting, me, and we'll touch on this a little more later, is but during the pandemic, you mentioned you sort of leverage your existing Zoom expertise to
Yeah.
pivot online. So how did you identify and capitalize on that? Because everybody at the time was just sort of scrambling. I remember.
Oh, it was wonderful for me. That first year of the pandemic, I had a great time. Not, I didn't think it was wonderful that we were in a pandemic
Yeah.
or all the bad results, but my company did well. I was already on Zoom before the pandemic. Remember, I didn't want to travel, not
Right.
very much. So I learned how to do some things online. when when the pandemic hit, some people knew that I had been online. I lost some opportunities. I used to do a in-person conference every year called the Boom Conference. We'd have a pitch competition and, expert presenters and things. And when the pandemic hit, the sponsors were gone because they didn't think it was possible to do something on Zoom. And I said, we
Right.
can do it on Zoom. No, that won't be good for us. So that conference ended, and I wasn't really totally worried about it. I don't get too worried about that kind of stuff because I've been through the fire. But someone knew that I knew how to use Zoom and recommended me to someone else. And then I did a conference for a company out in Ohio. And then somebody else said, "Oh, you did that. Can you do this for us?" And then, and it just kind of, people found me. I didn't really like, I did promote it a little bit. I did promote it a little bit, but people found me. So I was doing like some Zoom production. It was before Zoom became as complicated as it is now.
Yeah.
Now Zoom is pretty complicated with like what, five different types of Zooms. But yeah, it was pretty good, using those skills that I had acquired.
Yeah, the adaptability is so important too for solopreneurs, right? Because, like you said, the world keeps changing, and also I have to say, there's even now there are good Zoom meetings and bad Zoom meetings, so there is a skill in ensuring that you actually, have a, I guess, a good Zoom meeting. In terms of just making sure there's interaction and people walk away with stuff, there are good and bad ways to do that, right? So I think
Oh,
that's
there's some ways
yeah,
to do it for people who, have large Zoom meetings. They're professional productions. I mean, they've got a whole tech team behind it, producers. I mean, it can be very complicated, but Zoom itself now has quite a few offerings that most people don't even know they have.
true. Yeah, I believe they do webinars and things too now. I haven't sort of I've scraped the touch, basically just not even scraped the surface of what they offer now, which maybe too complex too, right? That's another problem.
You may not even need it. I,
Yeah.
I do Zoom meetings and webinars, but I've never done a Zoom event. I probably never will because
Yeah.
right now I don't think I need it.
Right. So the other thing you mentioned to me is also you've embraced AI in your work with solopreneurs, right? You talked about it a minute ago. So how has this technological shift transformed your business model and also the results you deliver for clients?
Oh my gosh. Um, when I talk about AI, sometimes I get these really negative comments because I am pro AI. And let me explain. I'm not blind. I know that there's a real possibility that many people, the majority of the people who will listen to this, may not have jobs in the next 5 years. That's a real possibility. So we've got to figure out what is our next best step. If we can't do what we've always done, what is it that we can do? And let's do that. The other thing is, people say, "Oh, AI is evil, you can steal people's identity, you can make these fake avatars." No, AI is a tool. It's not evil. It's the evil people. And until you learn how to legislate the evilness out of people, you will always get evil deeds done with any tool, any tool. So that's the way I look at it. But right now, it's going to save us time. It's going to save us effort. It's going to save us money. It is going to help us analyze things quickly and efficiently that it would have taken us months to analyze, and we would have maybe never gotten to the depths once we know how to use it. Just that analysis alone. So for freelancers, when you think about, okay, you've got a skill, you're going to sell that particular skill, you probably don't know a lot about, most freelancers don't, some seasons ones do, but you may not know a lot about, where do you find your customer avatar? How do you speak their language? How do you market? All of those things. Now we have AI to speed us through that whole process. The whole like business model, development, our lean canvas models. We can develop these things and tweak them so fast. When I did my first business model way back when I did that very first one, I was in a course that took 4 months. And I walked away, and it probably still wasn't as good as it needed to be.
Yeah.
Now you can do a really good business model. You just have to make sure you vet all of the statistics and the references, everything. You need to vet it. But you could do a really good business plan and model in, maybe you want to take 3 days to do it. I mean, that's a game changer, total game changer.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with your analysis too. I mean, I'm in the same boat, which is, it's like people talk about money being evil. It's the same thing. It's neither good nor bad. It's it's how people use it and what they sort of interpret, sort of layer on it. But I think, for me, I always joke about I have three assistants, right? Claude, GPT,
Right.
and Gemini. And
Right.
it's allowed me to do things that I would never have been able to do as a solo business owner before, right? And the only thing I always caution people, though, is don't outsource your thinking to AI, right?
Right.
Use it as a tool. So I always say, tell AI what to do, never ask AI what to do. So, and I think that's sort of the fundamental, thought process in terms of. But and I agree with you. And
That's interesting, though. That's interesting. You
yeah,
say, tell it what to do. I have a conversation with it.
yeah,
I used to tell it what to do, but now since I have the conversation with it, I get much better results. So I would tell it what my goal is,
yes,
what outcome I'm trying to produce. And I'll say, hey, what's the best way to approach this? And who's used this model before? And what were the outcomes? I'll just go back and forth with it as if I had a partner that
yes,
I was working with, and we have different perspectives, because a lot of times when I question it, it will go get some additional data that I would have never even dreamed about and make a recommendation. And I'll have like numerous aha moments. And it's not what I started out thinking the solution would be to a problem. It'll come up with something totally different. But I will say, when you are asking it stuff, just vet everything that comes out, because it still has hallucinations. Did I
yeah,
tell you about the crazy hallucination it had on me?
no,
Okay. So I was teaching these people how to use AI for looking for a job. And I said, oh, take all your identifying information out of it because you don't want that on there. And I use my own, I had like a 5-page resume. I was trying to have it turn it into a 1 to 2 page resume. And it came back and it changed my information, even though I said, don't use anything else except for this resume. This is the only thing you can use, only quote from here. It came back and it said that I went to Howard University, which is an African American university here in the DC area. I did not. It said that I went to Ohio State University. I'm from the state of Ohio, but I didn't go to Ohio State. So it still went online and made some assumptions about me. It still hallucinates. So we definitely have to vet everything that comes out of it.
Yeah, no, no, I completely agree with you. You have to vet. And when I mean don't outsource your thinking, I agree with you. You have to have a conversation, right? And push back.
Yes.
So I always tell it, but wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Then I'll come back and say, oops, I'm sorry. You're right. I shouldn't have, it'll be like a little oopsie. But yes, I agree with you. It's like you have to, and that's where the magic happens, right? Is that fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh back and forth is like you said, you get to something unexpected. And I think the problem is most people use it as like, give me an idea or here's what I want, and that's it.
Hmm.
So yeah, that doesn't really get you anywhere. So the other thing that's interesting to me is, a lot of solopreneurs resist change out of fear or because they think it might dilute their offering. So what advice would you give them about staying nimble while staying consistent in terms of what their brand's core brand stands for?
The bottom line is that we live in an era of change. You can't get around it.
Yeah.
We're in a technology, and now that AI agents and AI autonomous thinking and all of that stuff, everything is in flux. So if we don't see it, try to get ahead of it, we can't get totally ahead all the time, but think through what are the implications for the business that I do. How can I perhaps do some scenarios? There's something you can play around with AI. Like, this is what I do. What are some scenarios that my position, my type of business, whatever it is, might it look like in a year, 2 years from? You can play around with AI. It'll come up with some really interesting offers for you. Nobody knows what the future holds exactly, but we have to know that the time that we're living in, I mean, I would love never to change. I would love to just sit back and keep doing what I'm doing, but we will find that it won't work as well over time. I talked to a marketing guy the other day, and that's something that he said, and I was like, I get it. He was telling me about, he's been in the marketing industry for years, and he was just telling me that all of these marketing strategies, they have like a life expectancy. So they start off like whatever the new strategy is, it's working really well, it's converting high, it's doing all of this great stuff. And now everybody runs there,
Yeah. Yeah.
copy, and then once it gets so flooded, the buying public says, oh, I've seen this 1,000 times. And then they run over to
The
the
next
next
one.
thing. That's
Yeah.
why marketing people, they're always reinventing their businesses.
Yeah, no, and I love how you said use AI to stay ahead of AI, right? You're absolutely right. We should be the master, not the slave to this technology. I think that's the shift people haven't quite made yet. And you're right. If we didn't, if you resist, I mean, if nobody wanted change, we'd still be riding horses, right? And running
Yes,
around on
we
the.
do. Yeah, yeah. I think about, my father used to be an elevator operator.
Yeah. Wow.
Back in the olden days, I remember as a little kid visiting him at work, and he would pull this little metal. They still have some of those in New York. And he
Yeah.
would push the buttons for people. Well, when the electric elevator came out, my dad lost his job. So he had to go to another type of job.
Yeah.
And I will never forget that. It didn't destroy his life. He was saddened when when the electric elevator came out, but it didn't destroy his life. And I keep looking at these videos of robotics and things that, I mean, so many things that humans have always taken the lead on. You can see they're playing around with robotics and intelligence that can do things that, like I said, it's going to replace anybody that says that is not, that's not true. It will replace. That's why we've got to think about, well, how can I partner with it? You can't learn everything about it, but just choose your lane and try to learn that lane. And, be ready to pivot.
Oh yeah, and absolutely, and I love that story because you're right. It's like you have to adapt, right? I mean, and it's just that only, and we've always had to do that. To your point, it's just it's the pace is a lot faster than it's ever been before, right? That's the only difference. So talking about pivots, though, so you've made several pivots over your 20+ year journey, right? So are there any signals or patterns that you've learned to recognize that indicate sort of it's time to reinvent or pivot or adapt? I mean, change?
Well, when AI came out, I think it came out November 22. I was on AI in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Now, I call myself a non-techie tech. I am not the person who, you're going to see on LinkedIn doing all of these fancy things. I do very simple things with clients that will wow their clients, at least for now, will help them do things faster with data analysis and all it, but they're very simple tools. So I just try to pay attention to trends. I love reading futurists, blogs, listening to futurist podcasts. Nobody really knows, but it's kind of fun
True.
to see what people think, might happen to help inform you a little bit and position you a little bit. But yeah, you've got to pay attention. We can't just focus on right now because the what we see right now, there are opportunities that are light years ahead of what we see right now if we're not future pacing. And there's no guarantee, but we still try to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm similar to you. I sort of love new stuff and experimenting with it, but there's also a little bit of balancing that has to happen today, right? Like, I mean, the problem is, like you said a minute ago, every time you blink, there's a new shiny big thing. Like, there was like, well, let's say, metaverse, right? That's like gone nowhere. Then there was like, we were all supposed to be living in it right now, and then there was like the blockchain, so like money was supposed to go away with Bitcoin and everything was going to be on like ledgers. So I think, to your point, this try new things, but you don't have to like bet the farm on everything, right? But AI does feel different because it permeates everything that we do. And the difference between that and some of the earlier technologies I mentioned is they weren't replacing humans, right? Or they weren't even trying to compete with what we do in terms of
Right.
skills and thinking. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really a very, very interesting time. For some people, it's a very frightening time, especially now when we have, a lot of layoffs in our
Yeah.
country. It is a little bit, discerning because some of the people who may not been they may not have been able to upskill, may find that finding replacements more challenging now, and that's why we have to use every tool at our disposal to try to make it work. And it's not always easy. I mean, it's fun for me now because I'm not being impacted negatively. But once it hits you and the jobs go away, it's if we don't have the right mindset, it can be deflating.
Yeah, and you're very right. In fact, I spoke to a future of work strategist. I had a very interesting conversation with her, and one of the things that stuck with me that she said during the podcast was that you have to be the CEO of you, especially when you're working in a company today, because that company job is no longer guaranteed, right?
Nope.
You have to be developing the skills we've been developing as solopreneurs while you're employed, because the world is that much more uncertain than it used to be, right? So
Something that was funny that was shared with me. I was talking to someone who had a job and they said they wanted to get to the C suite and they were already like being, groomed, but there were a couple other people being groomed too. So there's going to be a showdown. And the gentleman said, "Do you think if I write a book, will that help me get to the C suite?" And we kind of laughed at my response. And I said, "It depends on who the decision makers are." Because if there's some people that say, hey, you're going to not only just get to the C suite, but you're going to jump ahead of me because you're so brilliant, and that's really kind of sad. But, you've got to know when to show your cards and when to kind of hold back in corporate America, because it's not always the most brilliant light that is destined to shine.
That's true. And
Yeah.
learning those poker skills is especially important, I think, in the corporate world, right? I've been there too, so I know what you mean. Um, so now you mentioned the book again. So I'm just curious. Though, so you help people build authority through books, right? But
Yeah.
what if a solopreneur is not ready for that kind of commitment? Because you mentioned it takes time to write a book. You have to have something to say. It has to be authentic. So do you have any alternative like authority building strategies that you found effective?
I mean, there's so many things you can do to build authority. All of them are going to demand time. And, it just depends on what you want to do. Certainly, things like what you're doing right now, you have a podcast. So when people start to look for solopreneur, you should come up. Doing live presentations, using the social media platforms to do random lives. It depends on what you want to be known for, too.
Right.
I don't think, well, that's not true, because there are some business people who actually dance. There's the dancing weather anchor. He does dances in Times Square. He's extremely popular. Um, so it really depends on what you want to be known for, what your options could be. But anytime you can be seen or heard or quoted is a good thing, because you want people to repeat what you say. So your unique point of view is quotable, is tweetable, and just kind of working on that would be helpful. Having lead magnets that are custom to your target audience.
Right.
Most people don't do that. They just, I'm an expert, so I know what people need in this space. I know what they need. Well, it may be what they need, but it may not be what they want. And we've got to give the people what they want so that we can give them what they need. So, talking to your audience and finding out, where do they hang out? What do they look for? What are they interested in? And doing that and being in those spaces. Sometimes solopreneurs wear themselves out trying to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Somebody said, oh, you got to be on LinkedIn. You got to be on Instagram. You got to be on Facebook. No, you don't. You don't have to be everywhere. Now there's software now, you can do one product and you can shoot it out everywhere. That's cool. But in terms of you actually, running all over the place, even if you have social media support, it's probably better to go deep than to go wide when it comes to social media.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Figure out what your audience needs, share something of value, and do it. Pick a platform and go deep there, right? I think that's excellent, awesome advice, Angela. Um, so let me ask you now. You don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball, but tell me what excites you about the future, and where do you want to be 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I would love to be on somebody's island working when I want to work, with a pile of money surrounding me kind of situation. But what excites me really and truly is when I can help people take their brilliance and monetize it, take their brilliance and present it to the world. I love to see people perk up, you know, face fears of public speaking, face fears of putting their opinion out there. I love to see when people realize you're going in a circle, when you're going to 20 networking events every week, and yet you're coming away exhausted because you don't have time to do your work. You didn't even get any customers there. So let's make some wiser decisions. So I get a lot of joy out of people who have brilliance using it and profiting from it. But seriously, in 5 years, no crystal ball. I don't even look 5 years. I don't look 5 years anymore. I'm on 26. I'm trying to figure out next year. I
Yeah.
can't do 5 years other than I'm on islands several times a year with the coconut water, but how I will get there, I don't do 5 years. I only try to do like 18 months worth of planning because um, I was working on right before AI came out. I had spent all of this time, effort, and money working on a new course because I used to teach people how to do books by speaking their book. Like you can podcast your way to a book. So I was teaching people that. And so I had did all of these recordings and got everything together. And then AI hits. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to take some time and see if I think this thing's going to have any feet. And I never went back to that process. I use some of the strategy. So you still can do some of the speaking in your books, and you should, because most people can speak better than they can write. Um, but yeah, I mean, I never even finished the product after I found out about AI. And I put a lot of time and effort into it, but I didn't feel, and it probably would have sold because I was pretty early in AI, but I wanted, the general AI,
Yeah.
not Amazon type AI that's been around for 20 years, not that. But I fell in love with what I could do with AI, and I just wanted to focus on how can I make my customers' lives better using simple tools.
Yeah, you adapt it again, right? It's like no point sort of beating a dead horse when you know it's not going to go anywhere. So even if you've put time and effort into it, and that's
Yeah.
another, I think that's important too. So if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
My one piece of advice is find something that meets two categories, and it has to meet both.
Hmm.
One is find something that makes your heart sing. You are going to need to love what you do because this ain't easy. It ain't easy. Everybody can try to sell us these packages. Oh, the copywriting is great. It's so easy. No, it's not. It's not easy. You're going to have to put effort into it, sometimes more effort than you've put toward anything before. You've got to pivot on dimes. You've got to invest, all of that. So it's got to make your heart sing because that's the only thing that'll keep you going. When you love what you do, you can keep going, even when you have tears in your eyes. The second thing is make sure your cash register is going to go ka-ching.
Right.
I can't tell you how many people want to do some, oh, I love this. Oh, I'm passionate about this. Oh, wonderful this. Yes. But if you can't sell it, if nobody wants it, don't do it. I know people who say, oh, my life story. I've got to share my life story. And I don't want to seem cruel, but honestly, most people, very few people, really want to read your life story.
True.
If you're,
Steve
if
Jobs.
important, if
Yeah.
you're important, if you got millions of dollars, if you made like a splash in the industry, they'll read your book. But an average, everyday solopreneur who is, the average one is not even making 100 grand. So if you're average, most people don't want to read your book. So your book is the icing. It's the icing. It's not the cake. So make sure you're going to love it. Make sure the market wants it. That's That sums it up in a nutshell.
I love that. And it's sort of like Angela's Ikigai, I'll call it, because it's a condensed version of that. I love it. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
No, I just want to encourage people. Sometimes when we get into this thing of entrepreneurs, and like I've been in it long enough, like I said, when I started that first business, I didn't have to do half the things we have to do now. I didn't have to hire as many assistants to help because there's so many things that need to be done. But I would just say, as you're, determining your plan, you have to realize that plans are lived over time. A plan does not happen in a week or a month or sometimes in a year. So if you look at your planning process each quarter, you say, oh, this quarter, I want to tighten up this part of the business as you try to also make money because you're going to have to fly the plane and build it at the same time. Then focus on that and don't get distracted by all of these wonderful free things that people are, because if it, like I'm focusing on marketing and sales. I focused on it last year and I'm focusing on it this year because this is the lifeblood.
Right.
So I've got to get, the marketing tight. I've got to get a good sales process. I've got to get all the foundational things in place so that I can get to the island. I can't get to the island if I have to do solo, touch everything, feel everything. I can't get to the island. So the only way we get there now, if you've got, like some of your listeners probably have a ton of money where they can hire as many people as they want.
They're on the solo journey, so I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, if you got a ton of money, then you can just hire, high level contractors to do so many things for you. But the average solopreneur, we have limited time and we have limited money. So we got to be very strategic about how we spend those. I just don't want people to keep circling the mountain, and spending a lot of time on things that deliver no value to the customer and no sales.
Yeah, no, that's excellent advice, and I agree. I've in fact earlier this year did an audit and looked at where my time was going, and I realized I need to spend. I was spending 80% of my time on non-revenue generating activities,
Mhm.
which makes you feel like you're doing so much and you're busy, but there's no output, right? So, yes, I think that's really good, and I expect an invite to that island, Angela, when you get there.
Absolutely. We'll be sharing a coconut drink.
I love it. All right, so that's a great way to bring us to a rapid fire round. I'm just going to ask you, throw 5 questions at you. Tell us what comes to mind.
Okay.
So complete this sentence. The secret to longevity as a solopreneur is dash.
Well, I have to use my pet phrase. It's your heart has to sing and your cash register has to go ka-ching.
I love that. If your entrepreneurial journey was a book, what would the title be?
If my entrepreneurial journey was a book, the the that's a good one. I would probably say I did. Oh, I got a good one. The day I stopped lying to myself.
Oh, wow. I love that. You have to write that book, by the way. That that's what's one AI tool you swear by other than the major LLMs?
That I swear, other than them, I like pick X. I like that a lot because you can build some simple things in there. You don't have to know code or anything like that. That's a good one.
Okay. What's a business buzzword that makes you cringe?
I might get shot for this one. I'm probably gonna get shot. Coach.
Okay. Yeah. No judgment here. What's the best $100 you've spent recently in your business?
In the business, I I would say new lighting because I do a lot of work online. So I don't even have it hooked up yet, but I recently purchased some new lighting.
That is important, not something everyone thinks of. So, well, that brings us to the end of the rapid fire rounds. Angela, thank you so much for being on the show. And I thank you for sharing your story, your journey. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Angela's story is a masterclass in intentional reinvention, not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that quietly reclaims your energy, values, and life. Here are my key takeaways. The heart kaching formula. Angela's advice is brilliant in its simplicity. Find something that makes your heart sing and makes your cash register go kaching. Both conditions must be met, no exceptions. Now, too many solopreneurs get trapped in passion projects that don't pay or profitable ventures that drain their soul. Sustainable success lives at the intersection of love and money. If you can't sell it, don't do it. Build the business that matches your life, not just your skills. Angela was in demand, her business was profitable, but she realized she was building around what she was good at, not what she actually wanted to do. Just because you're thriving externally doesn't mean your model is sustainable internally. Pay attention to the friction before it becomes just a different set of handcuffs. Adaptability is a survival skill. When AI emerged, Angela was experimenting within 2 weeks. She didn't wait for perfect understanding. She started playing with simple tools that could wow her clients. The businesses that thrive aren't the ones with the best plans. They're the ones that can pivot quickly when the world shifts. Your ability to adapt isn't just a nice to have, it's your competitive advantage. Authority through authenticity. Angela's journey to becoming a national expert wasn't planned. It happened because she kept putting her work out there even when it felt vulnerable. Publishers found her, opportunities emerged, and expertise compounded. Stop waiting for permission to share your knowledge. The expert you're seeking already exists. It's you. Your job isn't to be perfect, it's to be present and persistent. Don't wait to want what you already know. Angela said something that really stuck with me. I already knew the answer. I just had to give myself permission to say it out loud. That's the crux for so many solopreneurs. It's not that we don't know, it's that we're afraid to claim it, afraid of who will disappoint. But your business should reflect your truth, not your fears. Angela's journey reminds us that the most successful solopreneurs aren't just building businesses, they're building themselves into the people their businesses need them to be. They're students of change, masters of adaptation, and believers in the power of putting their expertise into the world, especially when it feels scary. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another solopreneur who needs this message. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.